Happy Devil's Wednesday! This is the State of the Fan Address, episode 253, titled Preparing for Ruff Deadline. Is there a pun in there? It's spelled R-U-F-F. Streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Coming to you live from the Primetime Radio Studios inside the bunker in North Jersey, Taylor Ham Country, and in Pork Roll Country, South Jersey, where they also eat scrapple, apparently. Nick Villano's bunker.
I don't eat that.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Yeah, I don't eat that.
Disgusting.
Nah. There's so many great breakfast meats, elite breakfast meats. When you got bacon, you got pork roll. If you want something a little less salty, a little spicy, you got the sausage. Why are you going for scrapple? What are you doing here?
Well, this is an off-topic thing, but I thought I've seen disgusting food in my life, and we like to talk food here on the Let's Go Devils podcast. But I ran into something on my news feed on YouTube. It's called Pag, P-A-G. I'm not going to discuss it, but it's the most disgusting thing I ever seen in my life. I wouldn't even eat that. I eat anything. I try anything, but I will not try
haggis? Haggis. When I heard what haggis is, that's like, why did we do this to ourselves?
It's a Filipino dish where they recycle garbage food. I guess the people are poor out in the Philippines, and they recycle chicken meat and bones, and then they make some nice flavor, and suddenly they eat it. Basically taking food out of garbage.
We all eat hot dogs, and hot dogs, it's like one of those things you just don't talk about, right? I know it's in a hot dog. I just choose to ignore it and enjoy its flavor.
Well, right now I feel like the Devils are kind of like hot dog or pag right now, because there's a lot of things going on. We got Pete Blackburn coming on very shortly, and Josh Reinitz as well, good friend of the podcast. There's lots of things.
I think they both. I think this is a first, Sam. I think they both become good friends of the podcast at the same time. I think this is both their second appearance. Now, Pete hasn't been on in a couple of years. We've let that man become as famous as anyone in hockey before he has to come on again. He's gracious enough to come on. He's got a great live stream that's happening on the What Chaos show. Which is the show he hosts. He does pieces all over the place, and he does video work all over the place. But the What Chaos show, he's doing a 24-hour live stream. That sounds insane. So we'll talk to him about that. But Sam, I can't waste any more time. We got to get right into it. I want to talk to you about the Lindy stuff at the end because I don't want to get cut off. So I'm going to talk about Toffoli real quick. We got 5 minutes before Pete jumps on. It just came out from Darren Dreger, who I think works for TSN now. I'm sorry. I know people move. It's TSN, right? He's not Sportsnet. He's TSN.
He should be.
Okay, so Darren Dreger of TSN just came out and said Toffoli is indeed available. Tyler Toffoli is on the market. The Devils have seen what people are getting from these players right now in the trade. And here's the thing, is that the Devils are incredibly lucky because everyone else has been setting an insane market. And the Devils thought they were going to be buyers. And everybody was waiting because these markets were insane. But it finally happened. Adam Henrique goes to Edmonton with Sam Carrick. They get a first-round pick back. Vladimir Tarasenko goes to Florida. That return wasn't great, but Tarasenko had a no-trade clause, and he was only going to go to Florida, which is like the thing now, is to only go to Florida. Drew, if you remember, did that a couple years ago. But he got a couple of picks. The big one was Casey Middlestat getting Bowen Byram. Sam, Bowen Byram was the guy I wanted in the Taylor Hall trade. I wanted the Devils to trade Taylor Hall to Colorado and get Bowen Byram because I thought Bowen Byram was going to be a superstar defenseman in this league. But he's going to Buffalo, which has a stacked defense with Dahlin, Owen Power, and now Bowen Byram. These are three of the first defenseman taken in the draft. I believe Byron was the first defenseman taken in the draft. So, they got talent out the wazoo, very young defensive talent. And I know Buffalo has had some hard times, but with Devin Levy coming up, they're going to be really good. So if you're the Devils, you have to trade Toffoli. It stinks. But
I don't think it stinks.
Is too good.
I don't think it stinks. I'll tell you a reason why. I don't know if this is legal or not. I'd say, like, look, Tyler, we're going to get a lot in return. You're going to be a UFA at the end of the year, and we will reward you.
Why does that never happen? Like, almost never. I think I could count it on one hand. Maybe I can only think of one.
That's why I ask if it's legal or not, because that's what I would do. Or is there some unwritten code?
The only one I can think of, Sam, is when the Yankees did it with Aroldis Chapman.
Mm-hmm.
They traded him to the Cubs. They got Gleyber Torres, and they got a haul for Chapman, and then they just went and signed him again. Can you think of it happening in hockey?
It's a good
I know the Devils
question.
have re-signed players later down the line after trading them, but never like that year.
It's a good question.
Gilney was what, like 3 years later?
Yeah.
Yeah.
His time. I mean, he made.
He
his
signed
money
as a
in
free
Toronto.
agent with Toronto.
Yeah. So, I don't know, but you know what? If he really wants to be in New Jersey, I mean, you know what? Look, go win your cup. Maybe the Devils would have to fork over something if that was a scenario. I don't know. I don't know the rules.
No, I don't think so. Unless, again, you can't tamper. It can't be outright tampering. But you can say to a player, if you want to come back, we are very interested in you come back to the offseason. But it sounds like they're not close on term or money. And the Devils have moved on when that happened. That happened with Tatar. The only reason why they have Toffoli right now is because Tatar wanted too much money. And so they went and got Toffoli. And here's the thing, Sam. We keep hearing about how much the Devils gave up for Toffoli. If you get a first-round pick, even if you just get a first-round pick, if you trade Toffoli straight up for a first-round pick, they win the Igor Sharangovich trade. Because Sharangovich was never going to get them a first-round pick, even with a third attached. It just wasn't going to happen. But now, you find this value here. And the only issue here is it's probably going to be a 2024 first-round pick. And the end of the first round for this draft is not great. So it stinks in that way, but maybe you can use that asset to get the next Tyler Toffoli, right? You flip it in the offseason, or maybe you use that to get Markstrom or another goalie.
Or maybe you just draft a goalie in the first round.
Yeah, I'd have to look to see what the goalies. I don't think.
Oh, I
there's
know. I'm just joking
yeah.
around. But either way, I mean, if they were able to get those type of assets back for Toffoli, I mean, what was Sharangovich originally? A fourth round or fifth round pick?
It was fifth round pick.
Yeah, I mean, just to see that asset just blossom, as what they say in the trading world, you could see that stock just split.
Yeah,
and just go
just
multiple.
going up.
Yeah,
on a Wednesday.
Yeah. Well, our next guest, second appearance here on the State of the Fan Address on the Let's Go Devils Podcast Network. He's the host of the What Chaos Show. His name is Pete Blackburn. You can find him on Twitter at Pete Blackburn. Pete, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're doing great. I first have to ask you, because before we get into the Devil stuff, you're going on for 24 hours for the What Chaos Show, for the trade deadline. Why? Why are you doing this to yourself?
That's a good question, especially at this point when all the trades have already happened. No, it's we've been trying to grow our YouTube channel, and apparently, the best way to grow your YouTube channel is just by offering an incentive and doing something terrible to punish yourself. And so we picked up over 1,000 YouTube subs in the span of 2 days. So it's been effective. We like to do weird stuff. We like to have fun with these big events. And so regardless of how many trades there are actually on Thursday and Friday, I'm sure we're going to have a ton of fun and we'll find a way to fill the time. It'll be an interesting, memorable experience.
Well, hopefully Tom Fitzgerald gives you a lot to talk about, but he's given me a lot to talk about this week. We've been having to write so many articles this week because, well, it started on Monday. a couple of the guys got word that Lindy Ruff was no longer going to be behind the bench on Tuesday. We found out officially on around 5:30 on Monday night. First of all, what were your initial thoughts to the move?
I mean, 2 words: about time. It seemed like it was long overdue. I said it right after the fact. I was in the camp of moving on from Lindy after the playoffs last year, and I know that would have been a tough thing to do, given the success that they had in the regular season, and then you win a playoff round in the first round. But man, you could tell going back to the playoffs last year that there were some issues with his management of the lineup, and the issues with being prepared out of the gate, preparing for specific opponents. We saw it several times during the playoff run, those 2 rounds, even in the first round against the Rangers. There were a lot of times where that team came out of the gate and looked very unprepared in the first period and had to play from behind. And that obviously continued this year. You look at the staggering number of times that they gave up the first goal. I think it was like 44 out of the first 61 games. It's insane. It's inexcusable. That comes down to preparedness. And then, the management of the lineup, specifically with Holtz in the bottom 6, and kind of the frustrating number of times that they just stapled him to the bench. It was really, really tough. And then, I know that there's injuries and all that, but this is a team that looked like it was designed to compete in that Metropolitan Division and in a wide open Eastern Conference, and just constantly kind of puked all over itself.
Yeah, and I think that was the issue, is that when everybody came back, you could claim injuries all you want, but when Hughes is back and Heischer's back and Meyer's back and, Bratt has never been hurt, and, Siegenthaler's back, you got everybody back, except for Hamilton. But, if Hamilton was the straw that broke the camel's back in this lineup, then, then you got to look at Fitz. But I got to ask, the Devils have been, they're either buyers, they're sellers at the deadline. But after last night's loss to the Panthers, you're looking at 20 games left and an 8-point deficit. Do you think they're cooked? Is the playoff hope gone?
I mean, it's most likely. I hate to say it. I mean, most likely, especially if you don't get a goaltender. I feel like we spent the entire season waiting for this to fix itself and for things to turn around. And you look at the proactiveness that a lot of other teams have had around the league in firing their coach and lighting a spark in that room, and it's led to good results in a lot of different areas. Devils didn't do that. They sat around waiting for things to fix, and it didn't happen. And I think you run the risk of just waiting too long at this point. Maybe things change with, the Flyers seem to be not committing to contending this year, obviously. I don't think any of the teams that are particularly in front of the Devils right now are any good. So, if there's a storm and they get in, it's possible. But at this point, I wouldn't hold your breath.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't want to do that. Holding my breath for 20 games sounds worse than a 24-hour live stream at the trade deadline when all the trades happen on Wednesday. So, but I do have to ask about the trade deadline, because the Devils are now steeped in it. They've been tied to a goalie since November. Like you said, nothing has happened. My whole argument is that nothing has happened in the goalie market at all. It seems like there's sky-high numbers on Saros and Markstrom and Gibson and all that. But do you think it's a mistake they waited this long? Let's start with that. Do you think they made a mistake waiting this long to fix goaltender?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like goaltending was kind of an issue last year. I think that it was a real gamble to run it back and to take a chance with the guys that you had in that room. And so it seemed pretty identifiable that was something that they needed to fix very early on. You said since November. That was sort of when the goalie market started to stir a little bit. And it's crazy that nothing's happened since then. But, it's not going to go away. You have to fix it. And there are a number of guys that are seemingly available. Jacob Markstrom, probably the best of the bunch. And if you can go out and get a guy like that, by all means, I say that it's either do it now or you're going to have to address it in the summer anyway. So just gauge the market and see when the best deal that you can get for one of those guys is, and strike.
So I have to ask, because this just came out. Fitz came out on Monday and said he's not selling Tyler Toffoli. Then they lost, and now Darren Dreger says they are selling Tyler Toffoli. Are you in sell mode if you're this team?
Yeah. I think it's one of those situations. Like I said, the chances of them making the playoffs, very thin, and you can't hold on to your assets with a minimal chance of striking gold. I think asset management, you have to recoup some of the assets. Otherwise, like, it is a total lost season. At least if you evaluate where you are right now from a realistic standpoint, you can start to put pieces in place for beyond this season.
So the Penguins are kind of like the big team, right? They have Jake Gensel, and the big talk around what Kyle Dubas is trying to do is try to get prospects. The Devils are they're in a different spot because they don't have an aging Crosby and Malkin, but they still want to be in that contention window. Do you think they're going to take a similar approach with Toffoli, saying we want somebody who's going to help us next year, somebody who's close to helping us? Or do you think they'll, should they just take the best offer, whether that's picks and prospects or whatever it is?
Take the best offer, just because you can always turn those picks, if they're high quality picks, you can turn those picks into part of a package to get a guy this summer or a couple guys this summer. Like, those assets don't necessarily, you don't have to live with them for the duration that it takes to draft a guy or whatever. You can just flip the assets over the summer. So that, like, I get what Dubas is trying to do in Pittsburgh, because that team absolutely needs to get younger. So I don't blame him for being like, we'd like to inject some youth into this organization. But it's not the same situation for the Devils, especially when you can turn around and utilize those assets in any way that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. I think that it's, I think Tom Fitzgerald kind of has to look at this trade deadline as, now that you're not buying, at least logically you're not buying, you have to look at how you can buy in the future and kind of get those assets. And getting a second first round pick, I think, makes you a team that's everybody has circled on. One thing that I noticed is that every single other GM either leaked information about the Devils and goalie, or like Barry Trotz just came out and said, Tom Fitzgerald keeps calling me and asking about Saros, and he's the one who needs a goalie. So I think that Fitzgerald needs to utilize that asset, that teams will always use them as, well, I'm negotiating with the Blackhawks or I'm negotiating with the Knights, but I know the Devils have 2 first-round picks, so that kind of like circles, they always fail to pull the trigger because they know they could always call the Devils and be like, well, we have this offer from them. Do you want to do this for whatever star player? Is that like kind of like, do you see that as like a situation Fitzgerald could put him in this offseason?
Yeah, I think that, like, it's not necessarily a point of weakness with everybody knowing that you need a goaltender. It's a thing where it's just, everybody knows that if there's a goaltender being moved, you should call the Devils and see what they're going to offer you. Even if you have an offer on the table from somebody else, you can bring it to New Jersey and be like, hey, will you match this? Will you beat this? And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad spot to be in if you're Tom Fitzgerald or if you're the Devils.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Before we go into the What Chaos show and the big live stream, I do want to ask, just going back to the coaching situation, A, what's your thoughts on Travis Green? And B, we have an article up on Pucks and Pitchforks that says this is going to be the best coaching opening that exists. Do you agree with that? So start with Green and then tell us if you think that this is going to be a desirable location to go to.
I definitely think it's desirable. I mean, you look at the roster and what that team was last year, what that team was supposed to be this year, it's definitely a desirable spot. You get a goaltender, and that's a real good-looking team. Travis Green, I'm not sold on. I think that you look at his body of work in Vancouver, there were some high highs there, but he lost control of that team pretty quickly, and it seemed like he had a hard time getting them back on track in terms of playing responsible hockey. And I think with how many guys have been fired this year, and kind of you look at the coaching market, you've got a wide variety of options where you could go in terms of the unemployment line. So I wouldn't necessarily rush to to hand the reins over to Travis Green.
I do think there's going to be a lot of options. Like, I think it's going to be like that one year where like Boston fired Cassidy, and like and Trotz got fired, and like it was like there was these bevy of options on the market. So I do think.
And I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what, the like the first 12 hours and one of his first moves being, okay, we're going to take Simo Nemitz out of the lineup that was a real, like, what's going on here? What are we doing? That was.
Can I try to make it make sense to you?
Yeah, please.
Because Nemitz should be in the lineup if you think that you're a playoff team, right? He gives you a better chance to win than anybody else. Honestly, if you're going to take anybody out of the lineup, it's Luke Hughes, because his turnovers have led to goals. Right. And I kind of went through it. Like, Nemitz has been on the ice for 7 goals in the past month when his speed apparently went down. But I think this was a conversation between Fitzgerald and Green, and he said, I want to get as many assets as I possibly can, so I need to get Brendan Smith in the lineup. How do we do that? They worked it out. They looked at how they could get Brendan Smith in the lineup, because I don't think Brendan Smith is worth much, but he's worth more in another roster than he probably is on the Devils. So that's what I think. I think they wanted to get Colin Miller and Brendan Smith in the lineup, get them 2 games before the deadline. So hopefully if somebody, whoever lost out on Hannafin or, they're looking for their backup ideas, Miller and Smith might be on that list.
I'll tell you what, though, like, if you don't know who Brendan Smith and Colin Miller are by now, like, they've been in the league for years and years. If you don't know who they are, like, and you're evaluating on a 2-game sample this week, a 1-game sample this week, you're an idiot. Like, you're already lost at sea. Yeah. And I mean, if you're talking about protecting your assets that you're trying to deal, putting them in the lineup, it probably isn't the best decision.
No. And Smith was awful yesterday. So if he was getting a 5th-round pick on Monday, he's getting a 7th-round pick in 2029 today. So, I'm going to go scout some freshmen in high school to see who the Devils are going to get from this Brendan Smith trade, and it's going to be great. It's going to be a wonderful time for us. But Pete, I really appreciate you coming on. I want to give you a couple minutes just to let everybody know, what you're doing this week. It sounds really cool. I mean, it's a lot of different elements. So just explain to our audience. We have a pretty big audience right now. We got somewhere like almost 1,000 concurrent, and let everybody know where they could find you this week.
Yeah, so the most important thing for us is YouTube, but we're on podcast platforms. But if you can, go to YouTube. We're youtube.com/@whatchaosshow, and just hit the sub. It costs you no money. We're live 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, every single day, and we're having fun. We're trying to inject some personality into the sport and its coverage wherever we can. Our interviews have been a lot of fun. The trade deadline stream will be live 5:30 to 5:30, Thursday to Friday. And we're going to have games. We're going to have bits. We're going to have a ton of guests. We'll have all your trade analysis whenever it comes down, whether it's 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. You'll be able to find it. We'll be live. I'm sure it'll get weird, but we're going to have a lot of fun. And you'll get to go see us probably go insane by the time the 3 p.m. deadline hits. So people always seem to be interested in watching people lose their minds in real time. So this is your opportunity.
Listen, I have a baby at home, so, I'm up at all hours of the night sometimes. And if I get waking up on Friday at 3:00 in the morning, instead of watching a live Love is Blind podcast, maybe I can watch the What Chaos Show and what you guys are going to be doing. I want to know what you're doing at 3:00 in the morning, because that'll be about 10 hours in. And that's
honestly, that's when some trades come down. Like those guys burn the midnight oil sometimes. You're talking Steve Yzerman loves to work from a dimly lit room. You think back like 8 to 10 years ago, like the Jerome McGinley trade that fell apart when he was supposed to go to the Bruins and ended up going to the Pittsburgh Penguins. That happened at like 2 a.m. A million people woke up the next morning and they were like, what the hell happened? So if something like that happens, we're first on the scene. Working the midnight shift, so I'm praying that something wild happens in the wee hours.
Even if it's just the rumor mill, right? If you're just talking about, you get the tweet from Elliot or from Dave Pagnotta or somebody that's like, "Oh, we're hearing Gensel's going to Florida for Barkov. It's like, oh, it's like that you talk about that for a half hour, you find out he's actually going to Boston. But that's the fun of it, right? That's why you can fill 24 hours of, Sam hates this word, but I'm going to say it, 24 hours of content. And we will put it out on all of our platforms, Let's Go Devils podcast platforms and the Pucks and Pitchforks platform, 5:30 p.m. tomorrow, right? It's Thursday. Yeah, tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. We'll definitely share that across our platforms, but find it. I'm sure it's going to be on the at Pete Blackburn on Twitter as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. I'll be super annoying spamming the links and all that. So yeah, if you follow me, you won't be able to avoid it, most likely. So just tune in and make me happy.
But it's going to be so much fun. Like,
it's
we love
the
show. The What Chaos show is so much fun, and definitely go subscribe. But Pete, thank you so much for coming on, giving us some clarity on the Devils, and giving us a little hilarity as well. But I appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Pete. That is Pete Blackburn, host of What Chaos Show. I'm going to be watching, Nick. I'm going to be watching.
I mean,
no.
That show
I'm going to be watching the coverage, not that C word, other C word.
Sorry. I couldn't, here's the thing, Sam, is I'm under the weather right now. You can probably hear it. I got like a rag to make sure that I don't, leak a faucet all over this place. But
we need
my brain was just like, just say it. I'm like, all right.
It's okay. You get a pass, Nick. You get a pass. That was a great interview with Pete Blackburn, and
we touched on a lot. We usually try to stick to a couple subjects, but Pete was rapid fire. He was doing great, and
I should have.
He has great knowledge.
I should have asked him, can I be EBUB, emergency backup broadcaster, around 4 a.m.? Get the call that, hey, we got nothing.
If I get
say.
a call from Pete Blackburn at 4 a.m., I'm coming on. Let's talk some Devils. Let's talk some, let's talk some impacts.
Yeah,
it's happening. It's going on again. But I mean, I do wake up in the middle of the night sometimes because of the baby. So, if Pete needs somebody, I'll tag in. He said, and I think he was talking about on Twitter they're going to do some like Twitch stuff, right? Where they like stream some video games and stuff. So he's not. It's not just going to be a bunch of guys sitting on their tuchuses for 24 hours waiting for stuff to happen. It's going to be like, it's almost like watching a 24-hour variety show just in the digital age.
I wonder what would happen if this podcast actually did 24 hours.
I don't know.
I think we'd be a mess.
24
hours with Ann Crew Brew, right?
I need. Is there an Ann Crew cold brew? Because I need plenty of that to get through 24 hours. What we'd have to do is we'd have to go in shifts, right? We do a 24-hour live stream. I don't know what would warrant a 24-hour live stream. It had to be a Stanley Cup, right?
Yeah, I think that's if it's not going to happen obviously this year, but
no.
If that ever happens, maybe that's what we should do. And coverage.
I'm not going to do all 24 hours, but sign me up for 10. I bet you Shorts guy will do 10. Vinny would probably do 20 because Vinny's a psycho.
Yeah,
so I'm sure you would do more than anybody would want to do.
Oh no! By then I will
30 hours.
By then I program AI. The AI Sam Wu producing, and I'll actually take a nap for 12 hours. While my AI performance. But yeah, that's what we do. Devils After Dark at American Whiskey, right? And then it just goes into the wee hours, and it's 24 hours worth of fun for that, if that happens. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, we got a year to plan, apparently, because ain't making the playoffs.
I said 2025 a few years ago, so right now, I'm not too overly concerned what's going on. But look, hockey's a business, and Toffoli's worth a lot to a lot of teams out there. Why not trade him?
There's no reason not to. I'm sorry. I liked Tyler Toffoli. I'm gonna sneeze real quick.
Oh, it's okay. I'll hit the mute button. Just let me know when.
It went away.
Okay.
I'm good now. Okay.
All right.
I don't know what happened. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Don't worry
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, it's so. I lost my train of thought. No, you have to trade Tyler Toffoli. You have to make the move because Toffoli, I think I'm going to say something that people aren't going to like. If you re-sign Toffoli, it could very quickly turn into the Palat contract. And the Palat contract is kind of a weight on this team right now. Especially a team that's not going to make the playoffs. The whole reason you got Palat is what you saw in the playoffs last year, right? Palat was really good against the Rangers, and he was all right against the Hurricanes. That series was just a mess. But I look at this from a realistic view that if you're giving him $7 million a year, which is that's one of the numbers that I heard was $7 million a year for 5 or 6 years. You can't do that. You just can't. And I get it from his perspective. He's having a good season. He's going to have another 30-goal season. He's 31 years old. This is the last time he's going to get that big money. But I can't give him more than 6, and I can't give him more than 3 years. And to his credit, he could probably get more than that in the market. So if it's more about, we heard from his dad on the dad's trip, and his dad came up and said he just wants to stay somewhere. And, we don't know how much that means to him against getting paid at top dollar, and it's not like he's going to have to accept a 1-year deal this year. He's not going to have to get the Tarasenko treatment that Tarasenko got this offseason. But he's I mean, here's the other thing, Sam, is that I heard, I don't know how true this is, but I heard that Gensel doesn't want to resign or doesn't want to extend to wherever he goes. So he's going to be like the big money free agent this offseason. So Toffoli's going to have to deal with that. We saw it with Tatar. And Tatar isn't as good as Toffoli, but we saw it with Tatar. He looked at he was like, oh, I could get a lot more money on the market. And the market just never happened for him. Mm-hmm. He had to take a 1-year deal. And probably less money than the Devils were offering him because the Devils prioritized what he was doing. They liked what he was doing. I mean, it's interesting to kind of see because I was listening to somebody say, hey, look at I think it was in Dan Rice's article. No, this was in Twitter conversation. Sorry. Look at the assets the Devils lost. They lost Graves, Severson, Miles Wood, Tomas Tatar, Igor Sharangovich, Fabian Zetterlund, Jesper Boquist. These were all contributors to the NHL lineup. Not to mention depth guys like Ahoytuk and Muka Maduin was a guy who they thought was going to be a depth guy soon. And you lost all that between the Timo Meier trade in the offseason. And any team's going to deal with a drop in production from that. I was hoping, Sam, that it would be like this. It would just or I don't know how to do it, but yeah. So the drop in production would eventually hit a pitch, and then Luke Hughes and Simone Nemeth would replace that production, and they mostly have. Simone Nemeth and Luke Hughes have been better than what you got from. Simone Nemeth has definitely been better than Ryan Graves. I don't know if Hughes has been better than Severson. Probably not, but he might get there by the end of the season. But, Sam, you got something to tell me.
Yeah, there's a super chat. Nick Gallo in the YouTube Live. I don't know what this means. Says, Nick, please explain to Sam that the future cap situation for the Devils is fine given the realistic futures of RFAs and UFAs, 20, then 30 plus. I don't know why you need to explain that to me. Does he mean it the other way?
So here's the thing. Yeah, I mean, the Devils are going to buy out Vitek Vanacek this year. I have no doubt in my mind. They're going to buy out Vitek Vanacek. That'll save up some money, so they'll get even more money next year. Here's your issue, is that they're probably going to want to negotiate a Luke Hughes contract this offseason, maybe next. You got to pay Dawson Mercer. You have to pay there was one other person. I remember that McLeod was on that, but obviously that's not an issue anymore. But you have to replace McLeod, right? You got to get a guy who's as good as McLeod at what McLeod was doing, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Face-off men are getting money now. Guys who do everything that McLeod was doing are getting money now, so you have to replace that value. And do I think their cap situation is bad? No. I think that once you add a goalie, it's tight. Like, they're not going to add – like, say they sign a goalie. And let me look it up real quick because I just want to make sure that I'm getting this correct.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go to Cap Friendly, which is probably the best resource that's out there. So the Devils next year have about $20 million open. So let's say you get Markstrom. That takes 6 of that. But you buy out Vanacek, that opens up another 1.5. So you're now at about $15 million to spend. Let's say Mercer gets 5, you're at 10. Right? You're automatically at 10. You have to re-sign Nico Dawes or Akira Schmidt. That's going to go up against – that's another $1 million. I don't think it's going to get to 2. It's about another $1 million. Excuse me. You have to either re-sign or replace Colin Miller and then another depth defenseman in Brendan Smith. So the Brendan Smith one, let's just say $1 million. Whether it's a prospect or a Smith-like player, that's $1 million. Colin Miller, that's another $2 million. So now you're down to $6 million. And then you're out of money to re-sign Toffoli because you have $6 million left and you have no depth, right? You need to replace the Nosek and the Tierney and like we said, the McLeod. Like, you have to replace all these pieces. The Devils are not in a terrible cap situation like most teams who have paid their stars, but they're not in like an enviable one either. They're fine the year after next. Because they got a couple deals that you don't love coming off the books. Actually, it's just mostly like there's like small ones that they'll gain a little bit extra money with. But that is also the ones you don't like are Vanacek. That's the one you really don't like. That's coming off the books. Yeah, but they're going to have about $33 million. But the cap is also going up. They expect it to be $92 million in 2 years. That's where you're going to get the $30 million. So, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I know you have another super chat, but can we take it after? Is Josh on, or do we have a sec?
No, Josh is on. Josh is on.
Okay, so let's talk to Josh. Then we'll just say that the other super chat, and we'll do it after we talk to Josh.
All right, not a problem. Yes, he's soon to be a good friend of the podcast. Second time on. According to Nick, I thought this was his third time on, but
is it third? I lose track of all
third. Has to be third. Yeah, it has to be third. I have a better memory, Josh. He's waiting in the Travis Green room right now. He's from the Hockey Writers. You can find him on Twitter at Reinitz ESQ. Josh, how are you, my friend?
Good, guys. What's going on?
Not much happened this week in Devils End, right? It's a pretty quiet week. You probably had nothing to write about. It's pretty simple, right?
Yeah, it's been interesting, I guess, is the way to put it. You go from it's really like it's been a new season since the Stadium Series. It was like everything was leading up to that, and now all of a sudden, like the wheels come off right afterwards.
Yeah, and the theory there is that I have to come and cover more games physically, right? Because I was in the building with you guys, and everything went great ever since.
Good luck,
I guess that's the moral of the story.
Absolutely.
But let's start with Monday. We learned that Lindy Ruff was going to be relieved of his duties. I'm going to be very straightforward with this. Where do you think this went wrong?
I was surprised at the timing. Sorry, my dog is pro Lindy Ruff, apparently.
Apparently.
No, yeah. I was really surprised at the timing. I thought that if they were going to do it, the time to do it would be before the trip. After you basically no-show against Tampa, that's the time to do it, right? Because then you let Travis Green have a longer runway. You let him have San Jose and Anaheim to get his system acclimated. I don't know what happened the last couple of days in California, but they must have really felt like the wheels completely came off and that they couldn't they were worried that the young guys were going to go backwards. And I think that's really what happened. I don't think there was any big plan in place to get rid of Lindy once they got back. I think it just sort of was a confluence of events. And I think Fitz felt he owed it to the team to give them a chance to get to the playoffs and give them these 2 games to show him that he shouldn't start selling. And I think, you saw what you saw on Tuesday.
So I'm going to ask you, I'm just going to kind of go off the board with a question real quick because I've been thinking about it today. Do you think he waited so long because he thought like a goalie was going to come, like a goalie trade was going to come, and that was going to invigorate the team, like a firing what, like theoretically would? Like I'm trying to like figure out the timing of this and why it makes sense, and like that's the only conclusion I could come up with is that Fitz thought the goalie trade was going to happen. Maybe the Flames owner nixed it. Maybe it was like at the finish line and he got pulled the rug out from under him. Like what is the point of waiting until this time?
So I think in November it was, okay, well, we got to wait till we get Nico back. Then it was, okay, once we get Jack back, everything will be fine. Then Jack goes out in January and you're thinking, okay, if we can just get to the All-Star break, we'll get everybody back and we'll make a run in the second half. Then it was, well, we'll let the Stadium Series turn us around. And I think Fitz finally said, hey, look, we're as healthy as we're going to be. We're still not playing consistently. I got to change something before the standards get too low. And I think he just kept thinking, like a lot of people did, that they were going to wake up and turn into last year's team, and it just never happened.
Yeah, and that's kind of a big part of it, right? Is that it just I hate to use this word, but like the vibes were off, right? It just like the vibes were so different from one year to the other, right?
Yeah, I was talking to Ryan and Jimmy about this after the press conference. Just it's just strange because it's a really good room. There's not animosity towards us, really. It's a good group of guys. You would assume the room is good, but I wonder with all the injuries and it just being so inconsistent that maybe they just haven't gelled. It seemed like last year the guys really policed themselves and took care of the room. I remember Brendan Smith telling me that he was really impressed last year at how quickly the young guys were correcting mistakes and moving forward. And you just don't see that as much this year. And
It's strange, right?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, the other part of it is, they lost a lot of guys that were consequential. You lose Nico, you lose Palat, you lose Dougie, you lose Jack and Timo. I think the thing I figured out was you had your top 5 paid players have been on the ice together for a total of 7 games.
Oh,
man, it's tough to win. It's tough to win that way. And then I think the biggest gripe with Fitz to me is not keeping Lindy too long. I think it's not weaponizing his long-term IR earlier. I think the time to make a move was December or January. Give yourself the runway to do what you had to do. And there were people available, even if they were short-term fixes, just to kind of get you over the hump. And I think the miscalculation was that they were going to get back to where they were, and it just hasn't happened.
So let's jump on that because you kind of mentioned it, and I think it's a good jumping off point to talk about the deadline and what has been done, what hasn't been done. You wrote for the Hockey Writers that the Devils are paying now for the lack of movement earlier. So what – and we talked a little bit about this on Twitter or X, whatever the heck it's called now, about what you were willing to pay. So tell me, like, say I came to you and I said the Markstrom deal can get done in December, or so when Dougie goes down, you can do the Markstrom deal that day. What price are you paying to make that happen?
Whatever it takes. Honestly, whatever it takes.
Like Mercer and Holtz?
No, but I don't think it would take that. I think we always over project what the deals are. With Timo, everybody thought they were basically going to trade half the team plus like first round picks for the next 10 years. Like it's the NBA, like that just doesn't happen. Look, I would imagine that they would want a 1 a high prospect, another prospect, and then the issue is, do you have to sweeten the deal to get them to take Vanacek back to make the money work? Because I mean, if you get them to take Vanacek, Markstrom's salary is like 1.5, so above that. So it's not really a big hit to your cap. But I would move on from Holtz or Mercer. I know the Mercer thing is the unpopular opinion, but I mean, at Mercer's best, he's a two-way forward. It seems like they don't think he can play center consistently. So now he's a wing, and he's, like a 65-point wing. His defense hasn't been great this year. And, what do you do? Do you now make him? I mean, you're going to pay him $5 million a year? Or can you find something cheaper than that to replace him that's similar? And I think that's the question you got to have.
The Mercer thing doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the Mercer's season doesn't make a lot of sense to me because we saw at points where I think it was when Jack was out last year. When Hughes was out last year, Mercer had a 2-week stretch where he was the best guy on the ice. Not even just he was the best guy on the ice. Scoring 2 goals in games. He was all over the place, playing great defense on the penalty kill. I do think he was kind of bad on the penalty kill last year, but he had the effort to at least get into places on the penalty kill. What happened to him this year?
It's a mystery. I don't know if it's the vaunted sophomore slump that just happened in his third year. I mean, he's still their top penalty killing unit is him and Haula. I don't know. I wonder if it's last year. A lot of it was him playing with Nico and Tatar, and maybe that sort of gave him a little more freedom. Maybe there's something nagging that we don't know about. But yeah, his drop off has been significant. And had he played to the level he played last year, maybe they could have weathered the storm a little better.
Yeah. Especially when, the McLeod situation, when he got arrested, I think that Mercer was the guy that should have replaced his production, at least from offensively.
Right.
And it just never
happened.
That's
your 3C, right? I mean, you figured you had three centers locked up for a long period of time between him, Jack, and Nico. And, the other thing, you bring up McLeod, I've wondered, and it happened at a time that they were on the road and then they went on break. And I tried to ask around to get information. I wonder if there was a real emotional impact on the rest of the team, when Mike leaves. And I'm not casting any judgment either way or anything like that, but this is a guy who they've all grown up with. He's been in the locker room, I think, as long as anybody, except for maybe Nico and Brat. And, just the emotional toll of him, walking out and then seeing him in a courtroom. I don't know what kind of impact that had on them. They obviously don't want to talk about it. And like I said, they were gone.
For the record, nor should they have to. They didn't do anything wrong.
I agree. No, they shouldn't have to talk about the underlying stuff. I mean, I just, from a human interest point, it interests me what the emotional impact was and how that manifested itself on the ice. Because 2 of their worst games they played all year was right after he left.
Yeah. And here's the this is a close, and you kind of touched on it, this is a close-knit group. We've seen the Halloween pictures. We've seen the party pictures and them going out on the road. And, this is a group that hangs out with each other, right? And I give credit to PK Subban because it seemed like it started with him where he was getting everybody together and they just kept doing that. But McLeod was there the whole time. And, it's the way it happened. I don't know how many people know the story, but he wasn't at there was a charity event that happened. It was right after Fitz re-signed, right? So I think it was the next day we found out, right?
No, it was so they announced the Fitz signing. That night is the sweep the deck thing where basically it's to raise money for the youth foundation. You can do curling and you can do blackjack with the players and whatever. They re-sign, they extend Fitz that afternoon. And call a press conference for literally 20 minutes before this event starts. And, I think Blitzer was the one that was there, and he's lauding Fitz, and they don't mention McLeod or Foot at all, then they don't show up for the event. And I think the reports were that the players were telling people that, McLeod was sick or whatever. And then by the time people figured it out the next day, that's when everything broke. So who knows what anyone knew or didn't know, but I really believe
we don't have to speculate. I don't want to put you in that position, but yeah, it was just the events would affect anybody, So I do, but I do want to get off this because we have a lot of other things, and I don't want to such a heavy topic. I don't want to weigh us down, but I do want to kind of talk to you about the deadline. We just learned right before the podcast, Darren Dreger came out and said that Tyler Toffoli is for sale. The Devils are seeing the returns that people are getting for wingers, and the Devils apparently want to be in that market. They're jumping in kind of late, but what do you think about that? Are you in favor of trading Toffoli, and what do you think they could get?
So I think they have to trade Toffoli. I think just rewinding the clock a little bit, it sounds like Fitz met with Toffoli and or his agents when they were on the West Coast. Toffoli's agent's based out of L.A. I think Tyler still has a place out there. So when they were out there, Fitz sat down with them, and I think his goal was, let me see how close we are to extending him. If we can extend him, then I don't have to sell him or anything. Fitz said in his conference the other day that they were off on term. Toffoli's 32. I mean, I'm sure the Devils probably want to keep him around 3 years, and I'm sure Toffoli wants 5 or 6. And that's a big ask, especially since, Jack and Nico and for the most part, I guess really just Jack and Nico, their contracts are going to need to be redone in 3-4 years. So when he couldn't do that, I think he felt that, okay, I'll listen on Toffoli and we'll see how the team does. And the team, lays an egg in LA. And then, everyone's saying they played harder the other night, and I guess they did. But at the end of the day, they need to win that game. They didn't win. So I don't see any reason to not sell. Fitz said, and I think the quote was, "I'm not shopping Toffoli." And I think what Fitz meant by that, because he sort of backtracked later, was he's not calling other teams saying, hey, what do you give me for Toffoli? But he's not against moving them if people call him with deals. And I think that's what's going to happen. Supposedly the Penguins are looking to move Gensel tonight. And if that happens, there's going to be, 1 or 2 teams that are not happy. The question is, can the Devils leverage that? And look, if you can add a first-round pick for Toffoli, which you should be able to do, that first-round pick can get you the goalie you want. It could get you another winger that's younger, that has term. I mean, I think it'd be malpractice to not move Toffoli at this point.
That's a good word for it, because I agree with you. I think it's you gotta trade him, even if he comes to you and says, "I'll take 4 years on an extension." I think you're like, because I said it earlier in the podcast that contract, if you give him 5 by 6, that ironically has a very good chance of looking like the Palat contract, where you're kind of like, do we overpay for this guy? What are we going to do with this kind of situation? Because he is, like you say, he's 32, so he's older. So I think I think you're in a situation there where where you just have to sell him. Would you buy anything? Are you would you buy like a Markstrom, or would you buy a goalie for the future? Like, are you looking to buy it all if you're Fitz?
So I think there's 2 different buckets that you're looking at, right? You want either to buy somebody like a Buchnevich or Markstrom, somebody that you're going to get a couple of years with. I mean, look, if you can trade Toffoli, get a first-round pick back, and then trade that first-round pick and a prospect and get Buchnevich at 50% retained, I mean, that's a huge win. You're basically then turning Sharon Govich into Buchnevich for 2 years, which at a cheaper rate, right?
Yeah.
Or you trade Toffoli, you're really turning Toffoli in a third into, Sharangovich in a third into a first round pick. It's good business either way. In terms of buying, if you can get Markstrom now, I think you make the deal, and let him acclimate and get into the system. The three guys I would move on now, goalie wise, are Markstrom, Saros, and Allmark are probably the only three that I'd be willing to do it right now, because none of them have term that scares me. In terms of forwards, there's part of me that says, look, if you trade away Toffoli, you have this extra LTIR, go get Jason Zucker and try him out. See if you like Jason Zucker as a middle six winger who's got some grit and some toughness. Or go get Vetrano. Flip the picks, go get Frank Vetrano, maybe see if you can get them to pry the butcher loose, Radko Gudas, with them. Now you're tougher, you got, the grit that you want, and you got term on all those guys. So, and look, my other thought was, and it's something I thought they should have done 2 weeks ago, was go get Tatar. Because Tatar can plug into the system. He can play fast. There's no term on it. He was a really good voice in that room, especially for a guy like Nemec and some of the European guys. I would have called up Seattle and said, look, cost you a fifth rounder to get him. We'll replace that fifth rounder, or we'll give you a 4 or whatever. And the money was nothing, and why not let him ride out the rest of the year here? And he's an instant upgrade over, the Max Willmans and the other fourth line, and Nosek and those kinds of guys.
Yeah. I don't hate any of it. The Zucker one. I haven't been able. I know James, or Jimmy as you like to call him, but James Nichols, friend of the podcast as well, wrote about him today. I haven't been able to read about it, but I will after the podcast, just to kind of see the logic there.
Well, what Jimmy said was, I think it was Jeff Marek said that he had heard that Zucker was available and that the Devils had checked in on him. I don't know how recent that was. I thought Zucker's a good fit for them just because he's got some toughness, he's got playoff experience, and he's supposedly a really good guy in the room. So, he's an interesting guy. I liked him last year when he was with Pittsburgh. So I think he'd be interesting. And if you're not making the playoffs, why not, try out some guys, see what you can find. And then maybe you can sign them at the end of the year.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, I would be hard-pressed to not ask, who do you think the Devils should go after as a head coach? Do you think Green is going to be the guy, or do you think that is there a guy you really like that might be available this offseason?
I think if you had Wonder Woman's lasso and you put her lasso of truth around Fitz, I think the guy he wants is Mike Sullivan.
And give him to me, please.
But I think Dubas is coming to the realization that, just adding Erik Karlsson and Riley Smith isn't going to be enough to get them over the hump. So what's the plan? And I don't know how attached Crosby is to Sullivan, but if there's a way to work out that, why not just do it? That's the guy I think for them. I don't know. The other guys, I think it's all really hit or miss. Travis Green seems, he's very. You can see his persona's changed in the 2 days since he took over. But I don't know that he's got all the answers. And it should be a job where Fitz should be able to pick somebody he really wants. And I think he really needs to think about the type of team he's building and the coach he brings in, and they have to match each other. You bring in Ruff and you want to play run and gun for the most part, to play an offensive system. You have the personnel for that. But then Fitz comes out in his press conference and says we need to win games 2-1. So, are you building a team to win 2-1, or are you building a team to win 5-3? And that, I think they got to really sit down and be very particular in how they pick their players moving forward.
Josh Reinitz, the hockey writers, take a minute, We got a lot of people still concurrent watching right now. Let everybody know where they can find your work and what you're working on right now, what they could find right now.
If you don't like anything I've said, you can reach out to @James_Nichols NHL and just talk to him. He'll be happy to answer that. No, I'm at J Reinitz ESQ on Twitter. My articles are on the Hockey Writers. I enjoy going back and forth with people. Appreciate everyone that follows and listens, and it's a nice community to be a part of. And hopefully, we get something to talk about the next 2 days.
I'm looking forward to it, Josh. We're looking forward to your writing. When we see something from you, we'll definitely tweet it out. But Josh, thanks so much for coming on. We'll have you on again soon.
Always a pleasure, fellas. Thanks so much. See you, Sam. See you, Nick.
Thanks, Josh. That's Josh Reinitz of the Hockey Writers. I forgot to invite him to American Whiskey to hang out.
He's everywhere that Ryan and James are. So he was at the tailgate. He was chilling with the Devils fans. I think he had some Ann Cruz stew, some free ribs. Those
I didn't know that because I was too busy working.
What were you trying to say, Sam?
No.
I gave my seat up so
Yeah.
my boy Vinny could get some experience at Chico.
I wasn't
I
saying you weren't working. I'm just saying that I was just so zoned in on that day. But speaking of which, the super chat, there's two of them that are now. It says, yes, Nick, Chris Boker. Yes, Nick, Holtz is Toffoli with more speed. Both snipers with bad defense. Stay young and spend somewhere else. Do you agree?
I don't call. I mean, I could see where you could come to that decision because they're both scorers. They're both not very fast. Toffoli is slow. But he's producing, right? And it's not like his underlinings are terrible. Holtz has some bad underlinings sometimes. And Holtz has a lot to learn. I like Holtz. I don't want to trade Holtz. I think that Holtz should be higher in the lineup. But he's out of position sometimes. He chases sometimes. He's better on the boards than I think the Devils even give him credit for. I think he wins board battles sometimes, but the positioning and so many times, Sam, he doesn't know when to staple himself in front of the net, and it causes odd man rushes. Not even odd man rushes, not even a rush, but they're coming back 4-on-3, right? Or they're coming back 5-on-4, and Holtz is behind everybody. So Toffoli has much better hockey IQ because he's older and he's a veteran. You would expect that, but I don't think you could just take Toffoli out of the lineup and put Holtz there and then just be fine. I think you are going to miss Toffoli this year, especially probably next year. After that is when I'm worried, right? 3 years down the line, is this the same guy we're going to see? Because, I did this article in the offseason. Toffoli has just been wildly consistent his whole career. Like a 30-goal season, then a 20-goal season, then a 15-goal season, then a 35-goal season, then a 20-goal season, then a 40-goal season, then a 20-goal season. Then last year he had 39 goals last year? And he's consistent again. He's going to probably hit over 30, but 30 is not 39, right? So, I that's where I'm at with Toffoli. But I think you should sell Toffoli, get the highest price, and I think it's going to be a good price. I think you're going to be happy with the price, and then go from there.
Select Boy says, Devil should look to Berube and Berube alone in terms of coaching.
I mean, I don't agree.
I've got my two coaches already.
Well, we're going to talk about Ruff. We're going to go into overtime if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I need to hear from you about Ruff. We need to talk about it. But I like Jay Leach, who's a defensive mastermind over in Seattle. I like Ricard Gronberg still, who is he's that overseas coach, and I think he's in Sweden. No, he's in Switzerland now. I got to double check. But he's somebody who who's just a fantastic coach, and no NHL team has given him the time, the actual job. But I know for a fact the Devils have called on him. I do. Sorry, any source is know for a fact it's weird, but I've been told that they called on him before, and like before they hired Ruff, and he hasn't come to the NHL. I think that's somebody they should definitely talk to. I think that there's going to be a surprise firing this offseason. I think if Sheldon Keefe gets fired, I think you have to at least consider it. Although I've really hated his coaching job this year, but the 3 or 4 years prior with the Leafs, I think he's done a good job. If I'm trying to think, I wonder if the Bruins get knocked out in the first round again, what's going to happen to Jim Montgomery? Are they going to just be happy with being really good regular season team? So that's something to look at. Again, I think there's going to be a surprise firing, and I don't think it's going to – I think Mike Sullivan's getting fired or let go or resigns or whatever the heck you want to call it. And I do think he should be number one on the list because I just think he's such a good coach. Like, just all around, top to bottom. I think he holds his guys accountable in the right way. I think he knows how to coach stars. And – let's just jump into the Lindy Ruff thing because this is where I want to kind of go. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, Sam. I'm just going to say it. What happened to Lindy Ruff? Lindy Ruff likes to give his players a lot of control over how they react, how they kind of go about things. And that's really good for a team led by Jack Hughes, and I think it's why last year went so well, because you had enough accountability top to bottom that Severson's going to hold you accountable. Ryan Graves is going to hold you accountable. Brendan Smith is going to hold you accountable. Tatar, even like a guy like I was going to say Wood, but that's not true. That's a lie. There's guys who had been there for a while. The guys that had, Severson alone, just having that a guy who had been there through the rebuild, who had seen 2018 from a good perspective, like he was a good player on that team, and then saw the rebuild again, saw the time before then. He played with I think he played with all these guys. I think that meant a lot to the locker room. And losing him hurt in the locker room more than it did on the ice. You still couldn't give him an 8-year deal. You couldn't give him that contract, but I do think it hurt. So I think what happened was this season, with all those guys gone, the young guys got even more power. And now Hughes is here with his brother. And you're not going to hold them accountable because that's going to, they're going to become a vortex. And you just didn't have, and then, Lindy's here letting the guy, I don't want to say the inmates from the asylum because that's just extreme, but you got these guys who are kind of let to do what they want to do because they usually perform. But when they don't, then Lindy comes over the top and benches them or holds them accountable. And you're like, well, you haven't said anything to me, and now you're holding me accountable. I think there was just a disconnect there. And it just seemed like I could see why you would want a Berube in that situation because you need a guy who's going to come in and kick some butt. And I think a lot of people are influenced by how well Philly's playing with Torts, but I don't think you could go that from one extreme to the other and it work. But anyway, tell me your thoughts.
What was very interesting was the press conference. With Fitzgerald, Lindy Ruff. I think he was sincere that it was a tough conversation. But what's troubling to me, and again, pure speculation, did Lindy really have full autonomy of this team? I don't know.
Think any coach has that. Basically, there's no Belichick.
Well, the Alexander Holtz comments, the fact that Travis Green would agree to interim coach, from what I understand, if he had full control of the roster. To me, is that normal or not? Again, let's put it this way. I think Lindy deserved better, in my opinion. And, I know everyone says, oh, Lindy, you're a Lindy Ruff fan, but I just think that Lindy tried to work with everybody, but there's just too many personalities everywhere within the organization.
Yeah.
You've got ownership. You've got Tom Fitzgerald. You got the business side, the business ops. You got the content team. There's so many. He did everything
Analytics.
he could.
The analytics department is very powerful in the Devils.
Analytics, the Hughes family, that dynamic as well. I think Lindy did the best he could. I think Dan Rice's article reflects that. We should say thank you to him because his DNA is all over this team.
And that's the thing is that, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was going to pivot, but why don't you finish?
This feels different than Hines. When Hines got fired, I was like, all right, good.
God.
I don't want to go that extreme, but because it sounded like Hines was a good guy, but it just the Taylor Hall run seemed like it had nothing to do with him, right? Mm-hmm. It seemed like Taylor Hall went Super Saiyan, and they had a hot goalie in Keith Kincaid, and that's how they made the playoffs. And that team was tenacious, and you got to give a little bit of credit to John Hines. But John Hines keeps getting jobs off of that year, in my opinion. But when you look at Lindy Ruff, last year, and this, I'm going to write an article about this, Sam. I don't know if we're going to have the energy just with the sickness to do it tonight. I don't know of a Devils coach who faced more adversity. So he gets hired in 2020 in the middle of COVID. The first year that he's there, he has the first year he's there, Corey Crawford quits. And we've learned more about that, and we're glad that Corey Crawford is doing better, and we're sorry that it was, a bad situation when it sounded like it was concussions and post-concussion stuff. So again, fine. But the only reason that Devils team was going to compete is because you thought Blackwood and Crawford could carry it. And then Blackwood got hurt, and that was that, right? And there was just not enough on this team to do it without a goalie. The next year, you start off with the Mackenzie Blackwood not getting vaccinated thing. So every guy in that locker room has to answer questions because it impacts everybody. When one guy wasn't vaccinated back then, you remember everybody on the team had to follow different protocols because one guy wasn't vaccinated. All the credit to Mackenzie, he got vaccinated because he did do his research and he ended up deciding that it was best for him to get it. So I applauded Mackenzie. I wanted to make sure back then that we applauded Mackenzie as much as we criticized him because he made the right decision. But that changed the dynamic of the team. There was a lot of stress off the top. And Lindy had to navigate those waters. And if you remember that season, there's a million things I could say about that season, but the 7 goalies is all you really needed to know. Is that John Gillies made a bunch of starts that year. Akira Schmid was not ready for prime time, and he had to make a bunch of starts that year. Andrew Hammond was at the end of his career, and he made a bunch of starts that year. So it was a bad situation, just through and through. Was that the – no, okay. So when Lindy got hired, they cut Corey Schneider. They finally gave up that dream. And then you remember Tom Fitzgerald was making all these interviews with guys, and he wasn't even the GM yet. They didn't hire him officially. They were still interviewing GMs. So the situation was kind of weird. Probably not a great start.
You're forgetting one major thing that people forget about Lindy.
What's that?
Nobody wanted to coach this team. Laviolette wouldn't give it time of day.
Incorrect. I'm going to tell you that Laviolette asked for and got what he wanted from the Devils in Washington. I'll tell you that because Laviolette asked for $5.5 million, and the Devils didn't want to pay that. Gallant wanted control, and he wasn't going to get that. But I think you dodged a bullet with Gallant. I don't mean to, but I don't.
Wait. So how am I wrong there? He wouldn't give him the time of the day.
Well, it was about money. It wasn't about not wanting to coach the team.
Well, in your negotiation, you throw a ridiculous number out.
But the Capitals paid it.
They actually paid. I think
it was like slightly under. I think it was like 4.5.
Yeah, because from what I remember, I thought Laviolette was like, all right, here's the number, and it was just so unrealistic.
It sounded that way at the time.
Okay.
It definitely did sound like Laviolette was like, you'd have to pay me a ridiculous amount to come here.
But regardless, I'm sure Lindy did not get the greatest contract, his first contract. During a COVID.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, he was probably underpaid, but he was happy to have a job and work with some young kids that see what he could do. But I was going to pivot over to my candidates if I was GM, but it's never going to happen. Number one, I'd do everything to get Rod Brindamore or at least drive up the price.
See, you say it's not going to happen, but there's so much talk about Carolina not wanting to pony up, and I think that's crazy.
Yeah, but I don't think the Devils will pony up either. That's why I mean,
you have to. You have
the Devils.
You are. They already
have. They already have Lindy Ruff on payroll. They're going to be losing money.
Don't. I don't think they do. I think he had an option for next year.
Okay. Well, that's the case.
I'd have to again. I don't know. That's what Elliot Friedman said earlier in the season. That he got a 1-1.
All right, but regardless, you got to go after Rod Brindamore at least to drive up the price because you got to get him out of Carolina or at least out of the Metropolitan Division if it's not going to be you, right?
But it should be you.
Yeah,
you can make it happen. He's probably the best coach. Maybe he's top 3. No doubt, top 3 coach of this league.
Plus, he's got the passion, the work ethic when he was a player, as a coach. You see him in the locker room. He is virtually just so passionate that he's practically playing the game with them. Yeah. My second choice would be Bruce Boudreau. But it would have to come with Scott Stevens with it on his staff.
He's Bruce Boudreau's up there now. He's in his is he almost 70?
Oh, Lindy's about 65, 66?
He's 64.
Yeah.
Yeah, Boudreau's going to be 70 next season.
Is he?
I think it's just he's just too far up there.
I like Bruce Boudreau. He's a likable guy. I think the fans will love him. Bruce, there it is after the Devils scored 4 power play goals. I would love it. But he did work with Scott Stevens in Minnesota. But, all the stuff that Fitzgerald was talking about in that press conference about cleaning up a lot of that stuff, the hockey, the game within the game, no better, well-respected former captain of the New Jersey Devils. His knowledge would definitely help in that realm. You got to teach these kids, and he learned a lot from Jacques Lemaire and Larry Robinson, and I think that will help the defense. It also helped the team overall, making smart plays, disciplined plays, and all. But that's just me. But I don't think it's going to happen. This team is really run by the Pittsburgh Penguins.
You don't like Sullivan? A back-to-back Stanley Cup winner?
No, it's nothing against him personally, but I don't want the Pittsburgh Penguins' identity. This is it's just like we're getting their leftovers all the time.
I did feel that a lot with Shero, but I feel like we're not as bad with Fitz. I didn't feel like Shero always got what was the guy's name? John Sebastian Day. There was always those guys. Our what's the other guy they got?
There was that
Bo
defenseman.
Bennett.
There was that other defenseman.
Oh, Ben Lovejoy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of they just kept going after these guys that Ray Shero drafted and just had an affinity for. or he signed or whatever. So yeah, I do see what you're saying, but
like you got John Marino, Fitzgerald.
That's true. Thank you.
But there's the Pittsburgh connection there. But I want to but then we had that Montreal connection for so many years, and we were successful.
Yeah.
By poaching former players to be coaches, and did the organization wonders. And we took a lot of flack for it as Devils fans being boring.
And here's the two things on that, and then we can kind of say goodbye. First of all, calling us boring was dumb. We were the highest scoring team in the Eastern Conference in 2000 or 2001. 2001. We were one of the most exciting teams of all time in 2001. So those people are dumb. We did the trap for 3 years or 4 years, and people still talk about the trap. It was from 93 to I think 98. And then Jacques Lemaire got fired, and they stopped doing the trap.
And then Fedoruk took it to a whole new level, more of an offensive game, which people forget.
Yeah, it's beyond insane. But anyway, and then Pat Burns had a really good philosophy too. So yeah, these people are dumb. But my last point on the coach, I think. This is the last coach that Fitzgerald's probably going to hire. So I think that I think it's going to go long like the last one did. And I think Fitzgerald also learned a lesson because he talked about it like Lindy was his friend. And I just don't think you can have that relationship between GM and coach. I just don't think it works. The GM has to make hard decisions. And the coach has to make hard decisions. And they both have to talk about that. You have to have a good relationship, but I don't think you'd be friends. And so we'll see. I think there's going to be a lot. Brindamore's number one on my list if that's a possibility. But I we'll see. We'll see what the Hurricanes do. But like I said, watch Boston, Jay Montgomery. Watch Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh. Berube, it just doesn't move me. I think he got lucky one year, and good for him. He has a Stanley Cup. Jay Woodcroft is a guy I liked earlier in the season, but I think now you just wait to see those really good coaches become available. And I'm gonna do my due diligence to see. You got Kevin Dineen too in the AHL. I like Dineen as a coach, but you just haven't had the success in Utica that warrants a promotion to the big leagues. So I think what you do, this is what I would do, Sam. I would promote Dineen to associate head coach under whoever your head coach is. Whoever that ends up being. I think you say, because they've stapled Rogalski to all these coaches, and I think you're doing a full clean out outside of Breland. I think Breland's sticking around, and I think a coach will be happy to have Breland. Breland's eye in the sky is fantastic, but I think all that's going to be left is Breland. So you bring Dineen up, you hire a new AHL coach, and then you get a whole new staff, top to bottom. You get a new offensive guy, you get a new defensive guy. It gives you a chance to look around the league, and it gives the new guy a chance to really build something for himself.
All right.
Am I remembering correctly? Did Lindy have Nasruddin in his first year? Did he stick around?
Well, yeah, and Mark Recchi.
But he hired Recchi, right?
Yeah, the COVID years, you're just lucky to have somebody that's familiar,
COVID years is weird. But that's another thing that Nasruddin did such a good job at the end of that season where Hines got fired, and now you got him standing over your shoulder when he interviewed for the job. That was probably a weird thing to deal with too.
Yeah.
Because he left right afterwards, right after that season. He went to, where'd he go, San Jose or Phoenix or something?
Yeah, somewhere. I forgot
Yeah,
where.
it doesn't matter. I think you were the West Coast. But anyway, can I do plugs?
Do plugs.
PucksandPitchforks.com. I mean, it's guys. I can't tell you how much of a go-to we've been for this. And I'm not trying to be like that guy, but I think we've written 21 articles this month, and it's March 7th. It's March 6th. I mean, we wrote. I think we have 10 with Dan Rice's article. We have 10 articles on Lindy Ruff, the firing, who they should hire, what got him fired. Like we covered it from every single possible angle. We have so many trade deadline pieces. 3 things to know ahead of the NHL trade deadline on Friday. We got players we should go after. We got what to do. Charlie Borges Jr. just wrote a piece about what to do with Tyler Toffoli, and that's going to go up right after the podcast. We have pieces on Alexander Holtz and how he's going to benefit. We have pieces on Evgeny Kuznetsov, why he might be a target. We have the trade on McDermott, the trade that they made on Friday. We got pieces on pieces on pieces, Sam. Markstrom. We got a piece on Jeremy Swayman and why the Devils should target him as a goalie and just go all in and pay the price that's going to take to get him. So we have more pieces than anything. PucksandPitchforks.com, and it's not going to stop. We're going to go all in this month.
Excellent. PucksandPitchforks.com. I was supposed to do a Woo report today, but it got sidetracked. I'll try to do a morning Woo tomorrow. But regardless, I'll be at American Whiskey tomorrow, 51 Edison Place, across the street from Prudential Center, before Devils take on the St. Louis Blues and Devils After Dark as well. So catch us there. Yeah, you know what, Nick? Here's hoping there's good news in the next couple days as NHL trade deadline approaches. We'll have to talk about coverage of that day, Nick, afterwards. Sure. Yes. See, I said the C word, but the right C word. But want to thank all those tuning in, dropping the podcast at midnight. And, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow from American Whiskey. And hitting the music right now. And want to thank Pete Blackburn for coming on. Can't wait to watch his 24-hour show.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be so fun.
And Josh Reinitz as well, of the Hockey Writers, coming on to this podcast. Well, have a great night, everybody. Till next time, let's go Devils.